August 4, 1981, Toledo, Ohio. A young secretary walks into her law office, locks the door behind her, and is never seen again. No struggle, no witness, no trace. Only a Bible left open on her desk, and a haunting message scrawled on a nearby wall. I love you, Cindy, by G.W. For over 40 years, this case has baffled police, broken a family, and haunted an entire city. What happened to 20-year-old Cynthia Anderson? And why does her disappearance still remain one of America's darkest unsolved mysteries? It was the summer of 1981 in Toledo, Ohio. The air carried that heavy warmth of August, the kind that sticks to your skin and slows down time. Families were busy with barbecues, high school football teams were gearing up for the fall season, and most people in the city still believed their community was safe. A place where the worst crime you might hear about was a petty theft or an argument that got out of hand. But in one quiet neighborhood on the west side of town lived the Anderson family, people of faith, discipline, and respect. They were the kind of neighbors who waved from the porch, who kept their lawn neat, and who raised their children with the values of obedience and humility. And their eldest daughter, Cynthia Jane Anderson, embodied those values completely. Everyone called her Cindy. At 20 years old, Cindy was what people often described as the perfect girl next door. Slim build, long blonde hair, soft-spoken voice. She didn't smoke, didn't drink, didn't party. She went to church every Sunday with her parents, never missed a family dinner, and always made sure to follow the rules. But beneath that calm exterior, Cindy carried something else, a nervousness, a quiet anxiety that friends began to notice in the months leading up to her disappearance. Cindy had been a shy girl growing up. Unlike some of her peers who rebelled against strict households, Cindy was obedient to a fault. Her parents' religious values shaped her world. She didn't date openly, she didn't defy curfews. She preferred books over parties, soft music over loud concerts. Friends later said she had a gentle sense of humor, the kind of laugh that put others at ease. But she was also cautious, sometimes too cautious. It wasn't uncommon for Cindy to double-check locked doors or worry about being followed, even when there was no obvious reason. By 1981, Cindy was working full-time as a secretary at a small Toledo law office. The attorneys she worked for weren't just handling divorces and contracts, they were knee-deep in criminal defense. Some of their clients were drug traffickers, violent offenders, people tied up in dangerous circles. And while Cindy's job was mostly answering phones and typing dictations, she often worked alone for long stretches. Alone in the office. Alone. With the phone ringing. Alone with her thoughts. She told her father once that she didn't feel safe. That sometimes the silence of the office felt wrong. And then there were the calls. Cindy started receiving strange, unsettling phone calls. She never told her parents exactly what was said, but they noticed the effect on her. Her hands would tremble after hanging up. Her face would pale. Then came the graffiti. On a wall not far from her workplace, someone spray-painted in bold letters, I love you, Cindy, by G.U., who was G.W. Cindy never admitted knowing anyone with those initials. But the writing remained, taunting her, visible to anyone who passed. Neighbors later recalled Cindy's unease. How she would glance at the wall nervously. How her smile seemed tighter those days, as if she was trying to pretend everything was normal. But something wasn't normal. Cindy's parents believed she was at a turning point. She had been considering leaving the law office job. She wanted something safer, maybe less stressful. Friends said she dreamed of getting married someday, starting her own family. She wasn't a reckless girl. She didn't put herself in dangerous situations. And yet, Cindy seemed to know deep down that something was closing in. In the weeks leading up to August 4th, she had become more withdrawn. She read her Bible during lunch breaks. She grew quieter, almost as if she was waiting for something to happen. On the surface, Cindy's life looked ideal. A safe home, loving parents, steady job. But for those paying attention, cracks were showing. Strange phone calls, graffiti with her name, nervous glances. A voice telling her father she didn't feel safe at work. It was as if Cindy was living with an invisible shadow. One she couldn't name, one she couldn't escape. On August 3rd, 1981, everything seemed ordinary. Cindy had dinner with her family, read a book before bed, and kissed her parents goodnight. Nothing out of the ordinary. Her mother later recalled. She didn't seem worried that night. She seemed tired, maybe a little distracted, but nothing unusual. If she was afraid of something, she didn't let on. But the next morning, August 4th, would change everything. Cindy woke up, dressed for work, and drove her car to the law office. She parked outside, walked in, and began another day of routine tasks. And that was the last time anyone ever saw her alive. To understand the disappearance of Cynthia Anderson, you have to step back into the world she lived in, Toledo, Ohio. In 1981, the city wasn't Chicago. It wasn't Detroit. It was quieter, smaller, a place where families raised their children believing the worst danger came from economic decline, not from predators lurking nearby. Toledo was a city of factories, churches, and modest neighborhoods. A working-class community where most people left their doors unlocked and trusted the neighbors across the street. But beneath that facade of safety, something darker was shifting. In the early 1980s, the Midwest was changing. Factories were closing, unemployment was rising, and with that came something people didn't want to admit: more crime. Drug trafficking was creeping into Ohio through Detroit and Chicago routes. Toledo wasn't immune. Still, most families believed in the old ways: discipline, respect, community ties. That's what the Andersons believed in too. To them, Toledo was still the kind of place where you could leave for work in the morning and always come home for dinner. But as one detective later said, even in towns like ours, shadows exist, and sometimes the shadows take people. For women like Cindy, working as a secretary was considered safe, respectable. But the truth was, many secretaries were overworked, underpaid, and often left alone in offices for hours. It was the early 1980s, before workplace security cameras, before cell phones. If a woman was alone and something happened, there was no instant way to call for help. For Cindy, this reality grew more terrifying as she spent long hours alone in that law office. The silence, the ringing phone, the creak of the door, all of it pressed on her nerves. The eerie graffiti message, "I love you, Cindy," by GW, became a kind of ghost in the community. People whispered about it, speculating who GW was. Was it an ex-boyfriend, a secret admirer, a dangerous stalker? For Cindy, it was more than gossip. Every time she passed it, it was like a warning. Like her private fears had spilled into public view, painted in black on the wall. It unsettled her friends too. One later said, it was like someone was declaring ownership of her, like she wasn't free anymore. By the summer of 1981, Cindy's nervousness was more visible. She double-checked doors at home, locked windows, and carried herself with a quiet tension. Even in church, the one place her family thought she found peace, Cindy seemed distracted. While hymns were sung and sermons delivered, her eyes sometimes wandered, scanning faces in the congregation as though she expected someone to be watching her. Her coworkers noticed it too. They recalled how she'd sometimes rush through her work, anxious to leave the office, eager to get home before dark. It wasn't like Cindy to complain. But now, the tension was impossible to ignore. At the same time, Toledo's law enforcement was grappling with a growing underworld. The lawyers Cindy worked for weren't handling safe cases. They were defending clients tied to drug operations, organized crime, and dangerous circles. It was the kind of legal work that attracted threats, angry phone calls, enemies who wanted silence. And Cindy was the one answering the phones. One police officer later suggested, "It's possible she heard something she shouldn't have. Or maybe someone mistook her for a target." So here was the reality of Toledo in 1981. On the surface, a quiet Midwest town, friendly neighbors, safe streets. Beneath the surface, a growing drug problem, violent crime, whispers of organized networks. And caught in the middle was a 20-year-old secretary who wanted nothing more than to live a normal life. Cynthia Anderson was a good daughter, a devout Christian, a hardworking employee. But she was also young, vulnerable, and increasingly afraid. Afraid of the phone calls, afraid of the graffiti, afraid of the silence that filled the law office halls. And yet, she kept showing up to work, day after day. Until the day she didn't come home. August 4th, 1981. It began like any other summer morning in Toledo. The streets hummed with the sound of traffic, the chatter of neighbors watering their lawns, radios playing soft rock songs through open windows. For most people, it was just another Tuesday. But for the Anderson family, and for the small law office where Cindy worked, this day would mark the start of a mystery that has never been solved. Cindy woke up in her family's modest home. Her father remembered hearing her moving about, quietly, preparing for work. She ate a light breakfast, brushed her hair, and chose a modest outfit, the kind of neat, professional clothing she always wore to the office. Her mother recalled, she didn't seem worried. She didn't act different. If there was something on her mind, she kept it to herself. Around 8 a.m., Cindy said goodbye to her parents and left the house. She drove her white Chevy to the Fondue law office, arriving just before opening hours. She parked her car in the lot, grabbed her purse, and stepped inside. It was a routine she had done countless times before. But this time, something went differently. The attorneys Cindy worked for were expected in later that morning. Until then, the office was quiet. Cindy likely unlocked the door, turned on the radio, which was something she always did, background noise to keep her company, and began her day's tasks. Coworkers later said she would often start by sorting mail, setting up dictations, and answering any early phone calls. But sometime between 9 and 10 a.m., Cindy vanished. No one saw her leave the office. No one saw her outside. It was as though the air simply swallowed her whole. Around noon, the attorneys arrived. They expected to see Cindy at her desk, typing away or answering calls. But the office was empty. At first, they weren't alarmed. Maybe she had stepped out for an errand. Maybe she had gone to lunch. But then they noticed small, unsettling details. The door was locked. Cindy had the only key. Her purse was gone, suggesting she hadn't planned to return immediately. Her car was still in the parking lot. The radio was playing softly in the background. A romance novel sat open on her desk, marked at a dramatic kidnapping scene. That last detail chilled her coworkers. Was it just coincidence, or something more? By late afternoon, when Cindy still hadn't returned home, her parents panicked. They called the law office, only to hear she hadn't been seen all day. That evening, they contacted police. At first, investigators wondered if Cindy had run away. She was young, sheltered. Maybe she had decided to start a new life. But her parents immediately pushed back. Cindy wasn't the type to disappear without a word. She didn't drink, didn't party, didn't have secret boyfriends. And she was too close to her family to leave without telling them that, no, something was wrong. Detectives searched the office. They found no signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. The desk looked ordinary, except for the open book with the kidnapping scene, which felt like an eerie message. One officer later said, "It was like she just vanished into thin air." But that was impossible. Someone had to know what happened. Police canvassed the area, asking neighbors, nearby businesses, anyone who might have seen Cindy that morning. Nobody had. Not a single reliable sighting of her leaving the building ever surfaced. Her car remained untouched. No fingerprints, no sign of violence inside. Just silence. For the Anderson family, those first 2 days were torture. They waited by the phone, hoping Cindy would call. They prayed. They searched streets themselves, asking strangers if they had seen their daughter. But every answer was the same. No. As word spread through Toledo, people whispered. Some said maybe she had a secret life. Others pointed to the graffiti, convinced a stalker had taken her. Some whispered about her employers, the law office's dangerous clients. No theory made sense. And yet, each one felt possible. For Cindy's parents, the most haunting fact was this: she had been in a locked office in broad daylight. And still, she was gone. For most families, missing someone for a few hours isn't cause for alarm. A late phone call, a delayed errand, traffic. There are always reasons. But for the Andersons, when Cindy didn't come home on the evening of August 4th, 1981, alarm bells rang immediately. This wasn't their daughter. Cindy wasn't impulsive. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't the kind of young woman who just didn't come home. At first, her parents thought maybe she was working late. They called the law office. But the attorney said something chilling. Cindy hadn't been there since morning. The office had been empty when they arrived. Her desk looked abandoned. Her car still sat in the lot. But Cindy was nowhere to be found. Her father's heart sank. Something was wrong. By nightfall, the Andersons called police. They described their daughter, 20 years old, blonde, 5'4", slim build, soft-spoken, devout, no history of running away. They begged police to act quickly, but the response they got wasn't what they hoped for. In 1981, law enforcement across America carried a dangerous bias. When young women vanished, the first assumption was often that they had left voluntarily. Police told the Andersons, maybe she just wanted a break. Maybe she's with friends. Her parents pushed back. Cindy wasn't like that. She didn't drink, didn't party, didn't even have many close friends outside of church. She was shy, obedient, careful. Running away didn't make sense. But to police, without signs of the struggle, the case didn't look urgent. This was the first blow to the family. And the first of many frustrations in the investigation, the Anderson home that night was filled with silence. Her bed lay untouched, her room neat and orderly. Her Bible sat on the nightstand. It was as though she had simply vanished into thin air. Her mother later said, "We just kept waiting for the phone to ring. Every time it rang, my heart would stop, but it was never her." Her father barely slept, sitting by the window, staring at the streetlights outside, praying to see Cindy's car pull up, but she never came. By the next morning, police began canvassing the area. They checked nearby businesses, gas stations, diners, anyone who might have seen Cindy, but nobody had. No witnesses reported a young woman leaving the law office. No one remembered seeing her car leave. It was as though she had been erased from the timeline. Detectives returned to the office. They examined her desk again, the purse missing, the radio still softly playing, and the open romance novel paused at a scene describing a woman kidnapped at knife point. One investigator later admitted, "It gave us chills. Was it a coincidence, or was it a clue?" The Andersons, meanwhile, were falling apart. Her father gave press interviews, begging for information. Her mother broke down in tears during church services, surrounded by neighbors who didn't know what to say. Her younger siblings struggled to understand. How could someone so careful, so good, simply be gone? And the community began to whisper. Some said Cindy must have left on her own. Others said maybe she had a secret life her parents didn't know about. Each rumor was another knife in the family's heart. In missing person cases, the first 48 hours are critical. But in Cindy's case, those hours slipped away with little progress. Police had no crime scene, no leads, no witnesses. The family grew frustrated. Why weren't detectives treating this as an abduction? Why weren't they searching harder? The Andersons knew something terrible had happened, but proving it was another matter. By the end of the first week, hope began to dim. Cindy's car remained untouched. Her bank account remained untouched. No phone calls, no ransom notes, no sightings. She had vanished into a void. Her father's words captured the fear best. We knew. Deep down, Cindy wasn't coming back that night, but we couldn't accept it. We kept waiting for a miracle. And yet, with each passing hour, the possibility of a miracle grew smaller. If Cindy Anderson's disappearance was shocking, the details that surfaced afterward only deepened the mystery. And none were more disturbing than the graffiti. Weeks before Cindy vanished, someone spray-painted a chilling message on a wall near the law office. Large, clear letters read, "I love you, Cindy," by G.W. It wasn't the kind of messy scrawl you might dismiss as teenage vandalism. It was deliberate, bold, public, a declaration. And for Cindy, it was terrifying. She didn't laugh it off like a silly prank. She didn't tell her friends it was romantic. Instead, she seemed unsettled, even frightened. One friend recalled, "She just looked at it and said, 'I wish they hadn't done that.' She wouldn't say more." Who was GW? Nobody knew. Cindy never spoke of dating anyone with those initials. She wasn't the type to have secret boyfriends. She lived at home, went to church, and rarely went out alone. So why was someone writing her name in public for all to see? Investigators later admitted that the graffiti could have been more than vandalism. It might have been a stalker's signature, a way of marking territory. Stalking cases in the early 1980s weren't well understood. Back then, the term stalker wasn't even used in law enforcement. Women who complained of being followed were often dismissed as paranoid. But Cindy wasn't paranoid. She had good reason to be afraid. She told her father more than once that she felt unsafe at the law office, that sometimes the phone would ring and on the other end there would only be silence or heavy breathing, and she admitted to friends that she often felt like someone was watching her. What if that someone was G? The phone calls Cindy received in the weeks before she disappeared were never traced. In 1981, technology didn't allow for quick tracking of harassing calls, but they followed a pattern. Frequent, disturbing, and always when she was alone. Her coworkers noticed how rattled she'd be after hanging up. She'd pale, her hands trembling. But when asked what was said, she would change the subject. As though she didn't want to put it into words. For Cindy, the law office became less a workplace and more a prison of anxiety. Alone, she would lock the doors. She'd keep the radio playing to break the silence, and she'd sometimes retreat to her car during lunch breaks, as though the four walls of the office were closing in. Her father remembered her words, "I don't feel safe there." But what choice did she have? It was her job, her income, her responsibility. So she kept showing up. Even as her fear grew stronger, the initials on the graffiti became the centerpiece of rumor. Some speculated GW was a man she once knew. Others thought it was a stranger, obsessed from a distance. Still others believed it could have been a cruel joke, written by someone with no idea of Cindy's growing fear. But if it was a joke, Cindy didn't laugh. And if it was an obsession, the obsession may have ended in violence. Investigators considered several possibilities. The secret admirer, a man Cindy knew, quietly infatuated, growing frustrated when she didn't respond. The stranger, someone who saw her daily routine, who fixated on her from afar, and finally acted on his impulses. The connected threat, someone tied to her work at the law office, perhaps a client of the attorney's, using the graffiti as a taunt. None of the theories could be proved, but all of them painted the same picture. Cindy was being watched. The tragedy of Cindy Anderson's story is that the signs were there, the strange phone calls, the nervous glances over her shoulder, the graffiti written like a love letter but felt like a warning. And yet, no one connected the dots in time. Her family thought she was just a little nervous. Her coworkers thought she was just shy. The police thought she might have run away. But Cindy herself seemed to know something was coming. When investigators later pieced her life together, one chilling fact stood out. Cindy had been reading her Bible more often in the weeks before. She vanished. She seemed more withdrawn, more serious. One friend recalled, it was like she was preparing for something. Like she knew she didn't have much time left. The graffiti, the phone calls, the unease, all of it pointed to a stalker building toward a terrible climax. And on August 4th, 1981, that climax arrived. Cindy Anderson was gone. Cindy Anderson wasn't working in just any law office. The attorneys who employed her were not handling traffic tickets or small-time disputes. They were defense lawyers, and their clients were some of the most dangerous men in Toledo. Drug dealers, traffickers, men tied to violent crimes. And Cindy, the quiet, devout 20-year-old secretary, was answering their phone calls. On paper, Cindy's job was simple: type dictations, file paperwork, answer phones. But in reality, it was something darker. Many of the calls she answered weren't from nervous spouses or business partners. They were from menacing voices, threatening lawsuits, debts, and worse. One former employee later said, "That office, It wasn't safe. People came and went who had no business being there. You could feel the tension. And Cindy was right. At the front desk, by 1981, Toledo was quietly becoming a hub for drug distribution. The city's location made it a perfect corridor between Detroit and Chicago. And the attorneys Cindy worked for were representing clients caught in that trade. Court records showed their involvement in multiple cases tied to drug rings. Some of these men were ruthless, the kind who believed witnesses, clerks, and even lawyers could be silenced if necessary. And Cindy wasn't just typing names. She may have overheard conversations. She may have recognized voices. She may have known too much. Her father remembered her saying she didn't like the job. She wanted something safer, something cleaner. She told him, "Dad, I don't feel comfortable there," but she never explained fully why. Maybe she didn't want to worry her parents. Maybe she couldn't put it into words. Or maybe she was afraid that if she spoke too openly, it would put them in danger too. Co-workers later recalled how jumpy Cindy seemed in the weeks before her disappearance. The phone would ring. She'd answer. Her face would go pale. She'd hang up quickly. Sometimes she wouldn't say who had called. But one thing was certain, those calls weren't friendly. One detective suggested, it's possible she took a message she wasn't supposed to, or overheard something she wasn't meant to hear. And in the criminal world, even an innocent mistake can turn deadly. When investigators reviewed the law office, they noticed the strangeness of Cindy's disappearance. The office door was locked. There was no sign of forced entry. There was no sign of struggle, which suggested something chilling. Cindy may have left willingly. Perhaps she recognized the person who came to the door. Perhaps it was a client or someone connected to the lawyers. If that was the case, then her abduction may not have been random. It may have been directly tied to her job. Police did question Cindy's employers. After all, they had ties to dangerous circles. But nothing concrete ever surfaced. The attorneys denied knowledge of any threats, denied that Cindy was involved in sensitive cases. Still, suspicions lingered. One theory was that someone wanted to send a message to the lawyers, and Cindy was the easiest target. Another was that Cindy knew something, whether intentionally or not, that made her a liability. Either way, the connection between the law office and her disappearance couldn't be ignored. Years later, investigators would admit that the law office angle remained one of the most suspicious parts of the case. Cindy may have been just a secretary, but she was also a witness, a young woman with access to names, conversations, and evidence that dangerous men wanted buried. And perhaps, on August 4th, 1981, someone decided to bury Cindy with it. In the days and weeks after Cindy Anderson vanished, Toledo police were flooded with tips. Some seemed credible, most went nowhere. And each false lead chipped away at hope. The first question police always ask, was she dating anyone? Her parents insisted no. Cindy was devout, sheltered, shy. She wasn't the kind of girl sneaking around with secret boyfriends, but rumors swirled. A few acquaintances said they'd seen her talking to a man outside of work. Some whispered about a secret relationship she was hiding from her strict Christian household. Detectives pressed her friends. Did she ever mention someone named G.W.? Did she confide about someone she loved? The answer was always the same. No. If Cindy had a boyfriend, she kept him deeply hidden. Or maybe he kept himself hidden. Cindy's faith was central to her life. She was raised in a conservative Christian home, attended church multiple times a week, and was known for reading her Bible constantly. But in the weeks before she vanished, her religious devotion seemed to intensify. Her friends noticed she looked almost burdened by something, as though she was preparing for a trial or the end of something. Police entertained a chilling possibility. Had Cindy been lured away by a cult? The late 70s and early 80s were filled with stories of cults preying on young people. Jonestown had shocked the world only a few years earlier. Parents across America were paranoid that religious groups were stealing their children. Some neighbors whispered that Cindy's disappearance was part of something bigger, that she had been taken into a shadowy religious sect. But detectives could never find evidence. The graffiti loomed large over the case. "I Love You, Cindy" by G.W. Who was G.W.? Police dug through Cindy's acquaintances. They searched records. They asked the community, but no one with those initials ever stood out as a suspect. No ex-boyfriend, no co-worker, no one in her church. It remained a ghost of a clue, taunting investigators, but never revealing its author. The law office Cindy worked in wasn't just any office. The attorneys were handling drug trafficking cases. One theory suggested Cindy might have overheard something dangerous. Perhaps she answered a call from the wrong client. Perhaps she stumbled upon a piece of information she wasn't supposed to. Could someone have taken her to keep her silent? Police tried to link her disappearance to drug cases active at the time, but no direct connection was ever proven. Still, for many investigators, this angle remained the most logical, even if evidence was thinned out as days turned into weeks. Witnesses began calling in with supposed sightings of Cindy. A woman thought she saw her at a diner on the outskirts of town. Another claimed she spotted her walking into a motel with a man. One even swore she saw Cindy at an airport, boarding a plane. But every sighting led nowhere. Each time police chased the lead, it ended in a dead end. And each false trail crushed the Anderson family a little more. Desperate for answers, Cindy's family turned to psychics. One psychic claimed Cindy was alive, being held captive. Another insisted she had been killed near water. A third drew a map with cryptic symbols, suggesting where her body might be. Police checked some of these locations, but of course, nothing was ever found. For the Andersons, hope became a cruel pendulum, swinging back and forth between possibility and despair. Perhaps the most bizarre twist came years later. A convicted criminal in prison claimed he knew what happened to Cindy. He said she had been kidnapped, held against her will, and murdered. He even named accomplices. Police took the confession seriously. They searched properties, dug through files. But again, nothing concrete. The confession crumbled under scrutiny, leaving only more frustration. By the mid-80s, Cindy's case had become a local legend. Everyone had a theory. She was taken by a jealous stalker. She ran off with a secret lover. She was silenced because of the law office's clients she joined, or was taken by a cult. Each theory kept the case alive. Each theory made sense in some way, but none of them could be proven. As the years passed, Cindy's disappearance became one of Toledo's great unsolved mysteries. The graffiti faded from the wall. The law office changed hands. New cases filled the newspapers, but for the Andersons, time stood still. Every tip, every phone call, every rumor pulled them back into the nightmare. And every dead end left them more broken. For the Anderson family, life after August 4th, 1981, was never the same. Each sunrise was a reminder that Cindy hadn't come home. Each nightfall brought the crushing silence of an empty chair at the dinner table. They lived in limbo, trapped between hope and despair. Cindy's father became the family's loudest voice. He spoke to reporters, pleaded with police, and begged anyone with information to come forward. He said, "Somebody knows something. My daughter didn't just vanish." But behind the strong words was a man breaking apart. Friends recalled how he aged rapidly in the years after Cindy's disappearance. His hair grayed. His face became lined with worry. He carried the guilt of a parent who couldn't protect his child, even though he had done nothing wrong. Cindy's mother carried her pain in a quieter way. She spent hours in her daughter's room, touching the neatly folded clothes, flipping through the Bible Cindy had left behind, staring at the empty bed. Neighbors remembered hearing her sobs late at night. At church, she often broke down during hymns. For her, faith was the only anchor left, but even faith couldn't answer the question that haunted her. Where is Cindy? For Cindy's younger siblings, her disappearance was both a loss and a shadow. They grew up with whispers around them. That's the Anderson family, the ones whose daughter disappeared. It was a stigma that followed them, even in school. Some kids were curious, others cruel. And every family milestone, graduations, weddings, holidays, was haunted by the missing presence of Cindy. In Toledo, Cindy's case became both infamous and frustrating. At first, neighbors rallied, holding vigils, printing posters, keeping her story alive. But as years passed, attention faded. Other stories took over headlines. Still, some locals never forgot. A retired police officer once said, "Every time I drive past that old office, I think of Cindy. That case, it stays with you." For the Andersons, one of the hardest truths was how slowly police took her case. If they had treated it as an abduction from day one, if they had chased every lead with urgency, if they had listened when her parents said she wouldn't run away, would Cindy have been found? These questions tormented them, and they still do, even decades later. Despite the years, Cindy's parents never stopped hoping. They left a porch light on, a symbol of waiting for her return. Every phone call, even decades later, carried the possibility, however faint, that it might be Cindy. Her father said once, "You never stop looking, you never stop hoping. Until someone proves otherwise, my daughter is out there." Though Cindy herself was never found, her case left a legacy: awareness. Her disappearance highlighted how law enforcement often underestimated missing young women, labeling them runaways too quickly. Faith and community. Her church and family kept her memory alive, showing how communities can unite in grief and resilience. Enduring mystery. Cindy's case became one of Ohio's most haunting cold cases, still discussed decades later. She may have been quiet, shy, and sheltered, but in Vanishing, Cindy's story became larger than life. A cautionary tale, a mystery, a symbol of all the missing daughters who never came home. For the Andersons, life eventually moved forward, but it was never whole again. Birthdays, holidays, family gatherings, every moment was tinged with Cindy's absence. Her mother once said, "People tell us to move on. But how do you move on when you don't even know what happened? When your daughter could still be out there?" That door never closes, and so the Andersons kept waiting, kept praying, kept hoping that one day Cindy's story would finally have an ending. By the mid-1980s, Cindy Anderson's disappearance had grown beyond a Toledo tragedy. It was no longer just a local family's heartbreak. It was becoming part of America's chilling archive of unsolved mysteries. At first, Cindy's story was just another article in the Toledo Blade, tucked between headlines of local politics and neighborhood crime. But the details, the locked office, the eerie phone calls, the graffiti, the Bible verses, were too strange, too haunting, to remain small. National outlets picked it up. Magazines like People in Time featured her case in sections about America's growing list of missing persons. And when Unsolved Mysteries, one of the most watched shows in the late 80s and 90s, began covering cases like hers, the story spread to living rooms across the country. Suddenly, Cindy Anderson wasn't just Toledo's missing secretary. She was America's missing secretary. The early 1980s were a terrifying time for parents. In 1981, Adam Walsh was abducted in Florida, later found murdered. In 1982, Johnny Gosch disappeared in Iowa, spawning conspiracy theories that lasted this day. In 1984, the faces of missing children began appearing on milk cartons. Cindy's disappearance fit directly into that national panic. Parents across the U.S. looked at her photo and thought, if this could happen to a girl sitting in her office, it could happen to anyone. She became a symbol of the era's fear, the sense that no place, not even a locked office, was safe anymore. As years turned to decades, Cindy's case moved into the realm of cold cases. Detectives retired. Files were boxed and shelved, but it was never forgotten. Cold case units revisited her disappearance multiple times in the late 1990s, again in the 2000s, and once more in the 2010s when DNA technology began advancing. Each time, detectives hoped a new technique might unlock the truth. Each time, the case remained stubbornly silent. Media coverage kept the speculation alive. Every few years, Cindy's case would resurface in newspapers, TV specials, or online forums. Some journalists leaned toward the stalker theory, pointing to the graffiti and the disturbing phone calls. Others emphasized the law office connection, suggesting Cindy was silenced because she knew too much. And some believed she had fallen prey to something even darker, trafficking, cults, or an unidentified serial predator operating in Ohio at the time. But despite the endless theories, one fact remained. Not a single piece of hard evidence has ever surfaced. By the 2000s, Cindy's mystery had found new life online. Websites like Web Sleuths, Reddit, and True Crime forums were filled with armchair detectives dissecting every detail of the case. Some tracked down old newspaper clippings. Some tried to trace the GW initials. Others compared her disappearance to unsolved crimes across the Midwest. And even now, more than 4 decades later, Cindy's name still sparks debate in true crime circles. In America, many missing person cases fade with time. Families lose hope. Communities move on. The names are remembered only by those closest to the victim. But Cindy Anderson's case is different. Her story has endured, not just because it's unsolved, but because it feels like a puzzle that should have an answer. A young woman, a locked office, a quiet city, no witnesses, no struggle. It's the perfect mystery and the perfect tragedy. Today, more than 40 years later, the Anderson family has no closure, no body, no confession, no grave to visit. All they have is a framed photograph, fading with age, and the same unanswered question that has haunted them since 1981. What happened to Cindy? 4 decades have passed since Cindy Anderson vanished on that warm August morning in Toledo, Ohio, and yet her story still refuses to fade. It lingers in the whispers of her old neighborhood, in the faded newspaper clippings stored in attics, and in the hearts of her family, who never stopped waiting. Cindy's disappearance left behind more than grief. It left behind a shadow, a reminder that safety is never guaranteed. She wasn't walking alone at night. She wasn't in a dangerous neighborhood. She was in her office in broad daylight, surrounded by people, and still, she disappeared. That fact alone terrified the city of Toledo in 1981, and it still terrifies people today. Because if it could happen to Cindy, it could happen to anyone. For years after she vanished, people remembered the image of Cindy's desk. Papers neatly stacked, the office door locked, her car still parked outside. It was as though she had simply stood up, walked away, and melted into the air. That empty chair became a haunting symbol, not just of Cindy, but of all the missing, of the thousands of names and faces that vanish every year, leaving families broken and communities shaken. Even now, theories about Cindy's fate spark debate. Was she taken by a stalker who had been watching her for weeks? Did she fall victim to the dangerous world connected to her law office? Was she lured into something by someone she trusted, someone who knocked on that locked office door? Or was there something even darker at play, something that left no trace, no witness, no clue? Each theory has believers. Each theory has holes, and none bring the Anderson family closer to the truth. Cindy's parents grew old without answers. They lived with the agony of uncertainty, never knowing if their daughter was alive, suffering, or gone. Her father once said, "If we knew she had died, at least we could grieve." But not knowing, that's the hardest part. It's like being trapped between two worlds. That's the curse of an unsolved case. It doesn't just steal a life. It steals the closure from everyone left behind. Today, Cindy Anderson's name is etched into the history of America's most haunting cold cases. Her story has been featured in documentaries, books, online forums, and countless true crime discussions. She is remembered not just as the missing secretary, but as a symbol of all those who vanish without explanation. Her disappearance continues to inspire amateur sleuths. Keep cold. Case detectives awake at night and remind ordinary people of the fragility of safety. And so we are left with the same haunting question that began this story. What happened to Cindy Anderson? Did she walk out of that office willingly? Did someone she trusted turn against her? Or was she the victim of a predator whose face no one ever saw? We may never know, but until the truth is uncovered, Cindy's story will remain what it has always been, a mystery frozen in time. As the years stretch on, the silence around Cindy's disappearance becomes heavier. But silence is not the same as forgetting. People still remember. People still ask. And somewhere out there, perhaps in a box of old files, perhaps in the memory of someone who has kept a dark secret all these years, lies the answer. Cindy Anderson was just 20 years old. A quiet, shy, devout young woman with her whole life ahead of her. On that August morning, she became more than just a name. She became one of America's most enduring mysteries. And until the day the truth is revealed, her story will continue to haunt us, a reminder of how fragile safety is, how cruel fate can be, and how some questions never get answered.